Several years ago, the Chester County Concert Band was performing a piece that had music from World War II, and it had a lot of neat sound effects, and one of them was an air raid siren. So I went out and I bought this replica of a World War II handheld air raid siren, and I mounted it on a stand. Now I just used scrap wood to build this stand, and there was kind of a nautical theme to this piece of music, so I went ahead and painted it Battleship Gray. Now it takes a fair amount of effort to move the handle, so in building this stand I put a place for my foot to rest so that I can hold it nice and steady. So here's what it sounds like. Now you might have noticed that the siren was wobbling back and forth, and you can see that I can wobble it quite a bit. Now that's not my fault, that's just the design of the siren itself. There is a piece of metal right here which goes deep into the stand, and I have it embedded in there, and then I have two other pieces of wood which encase it. So it is nice and steady and is not moving anywhere. However, the siren is attached to that piece of metal just with two little bolts, and there's a lot of play in those bolts, so that's why it kind of wobbles back and forth. Doesn't seem to affect anything though. My next musical project involves mounting some taxi horns. The Chester County Concert Band is now playing American in Paris, and there's a scene in it obviously that has traffic. So I want to mount these. So we already had this small guy here, but I bought on eBay and on Amazon two other bulb horns. Now, I'm really disappointed in this larger double bulb horn. It's not very predictable, and it kind of has a low sound to it, and it's a little bit sluggish, but it does work. But this next one, which is called an Iuga horn, is a much higher pitch. So when I put those two together, it has kind of a nice sound. So my plan here is to mount this horn here, and between these two, that sounds pretty different. So I can have two different sounds going. This one will go ahead and be blown for everyone. Two of these horns are already installed. So I'm going to take them out now so that I can make the hole for the third horn. These are just screwed in, and it acts as a clamp. So you can see here that these are really just half of a hole, and I did that by drilling the holes when the board was one piece, and then I took the bandsaw and just sawed straight down the length of the board. And now it acts as a clamp that tightly secures those horns in place. I've taken the bulb off of the little horn. It just screws right off. And it of course just produces the air when you squeeze it. Inside the horn, there's this little metal reed, and that's what produces the sound. But what I'm really interested in is the width, the diameter right here, of this opening. So what I've done is I found a Forstner bit which matches that exactly, and it happens to be a 1/2 inch. So I'm going to take the two boards, this one here and this one, and I'm going to clamp them back together, and I'm going to drill a hole right here. However, I'm going to put a little sliver of a board right in between so that when I take that board out, there'll be more clamping pressure to put down on the bulb horn. So I have a very thin shim here, which I'm going to place right on this board, and then I'm going to screw this back together. Now it is just a matter of aligning the holes up. So I'll start off down here on the end where I can find that hole easier. Okay, it's in. That one's in. That one's in. And there we are. So you can see that these two boards are not right up against each other. So when I drill my hole and then take out that board, it will clamp down tighter. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this on the drill press like this, which means I need to shave off this shim so that it can lie flat on the drill press. Good. It was at this point that I reached a little snag and I couldn't quite figure out what it was. But then I realized the handle was hitting the piece of plywood. So I simply took off the knob and now I had plenty of clearance to complete my cut. Now that I have that third hole in there, I'm going to take the screws out again. Take out the shims, and I'm just going to do a little test fit to make sure that this works. I'm going to screw that down. That's nice and tight. Okay, so that's going to work out perfectly. So rather than assembling the whole thing again, I'm going to take it apart and I'm going to go ahead and make a support on this back area which will attach it to what had been my air raid siren stand. I'm going to keep the air raid siren on it because it's embedded into the wood. So this is just going to go on top of it and I can just screw it in or take it off if need be. I have a scrap of 2x6 left over from my workbench project. It has a pretty nasty crack right down the middle. So I'm just going to use my table saw to saw off pretty much the widest board I can get out of this. And then I'm going to use that board on the back of this stand so that I can then put my platform for all my bulb horns on top. And I'll go ahead and put this over on the jointer and then on the planer, and then I'm going to rabbet out an area for the bulb horn stand to actually sit on. So here is the nice rabbet that this will just sit right on like that. With the rabbet complete, it's now time to round over all of the edges. I'm going to have one bolt attaching this board to this, because I want to be able to take this off because I don't want those bulb horns to be damaged while I'm transporting this in my car or in the trailer or anywhere else where we take it. So this is going to go right here, and I've already marked off exactly where I want this hole to go. So I'm just going to drill these at the same time. Okay, so hopefully this bolt will go straight into that. Good. So I just drilled straight in and did a little bit of a countersink, and I'm going to put a 2-inch screw right in, hopefully. Now this allows me to have enough room to actually still use the siren and have the horns right up here. Time for sanding and some paint. The paint is dry, and it is time for assembly. So I cut 2 strips of this foam padding that I used as the underlayment for my flooring, and that strip is just going to fit right on top here. It's longer than the board because when you put the horns in, that's going to push that down. So I'm actually going to staple it right to the edge, and then the horns will stretch out the material when I install them. So I'm just going to put them in there with a little staple to begin with. I'm going to put one more staple towards the middle, so I'll just put the horns in here so that it will compress it. Evenly across. Okay. There we go. And then I'm going to do the same thing for the piece that holds it down. So with that done, it's just a matter of installing these the way I want them. So those will go up. Okay. So I obviously don't want to go too tight or I'll crush things, but tight enough that everything will stay in place. So now I'm going to align them just the way I want them. And put in the remaining screws. Okay, that doesn't turn, that doesn't turn, and that doesn't turn. Okay, all of that is functioning nicely. All you really need to secure the horns is just this bar that we have here. But I added this board on the bottom for 2 reasons. One is it gives some added protection to the horns so that you don't really bump into the horns themselves, except maybe at the very end. And secondly, there are certainly going to be times when my percussionists won't have that other stand, and they can simply just rest this on top of some other surface. They can put a towel down on top of a xylophone or a music stand or a snare drum or something like that, and have an easy way to quickly get to this instrument without having to lug around that giant stand. So now I need to attach this to the stand. It's just going to take 4 screws. So that clearly is not going to go anywhere. Okay. So I'll put the flat washer here, and the spring washer, another flat washer, and then the wing nut. Now I'm going to have to do this wing nut pretty tight to draw this bolt into the wood in the back so that it won't be turning. But that shouldn't be too hard to do. I brought pliers. Yep, it's coming in right now. Okay. So that doesn't move. And of course, this would be facing the audience just like this. A little weird looking, kind of silly, but wind is a bulb horn, not silly. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this, please hit the like button. And if you haven't already, please subscribe.